Ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 panels left, and I am incredibly impressed by the turnout that we still have here today. So you're obviously all still interested, which is a good thing. Well, we've heard about producing food in precision fermentation. But what are the trends and use cases? Time now to find out through our next esteemed panel guests. Please give a very warm welcome to Rajesh Krishnamurthy, the CEO of Laureus Bio from India. A very warm welcome to Rajesh, who's with us here today. Lovely to have you here. Next up, we have David Buka, the CEO of Change Foods, USA and UAE. A very warm welcome. And now please welcome back, we heard from him earlier, Dr. Stefan Rascher, the head of the Department of Plant Biotechnology at Fraunhofer Institute, Germany. A very warm welcome. Right, gentlemen, I'm going to be sitting this side, as I think I got it wrong earlier, but anyway, I've been told this is the side to sit in. Right, really fantastic to have you all here. A wonderful panel of scientists here on the stage. Experts in fermentation, recombinant and sweet proteins, might I add, as well. Right, I have a couple of questions for you, then we're going to throw out to the audience as usual. Please do make sure to get some really good questions going. Right, David Buka, I'm going to start off with you. Right, you're the founder and the CEO of Change Foods, which is starting the construction of a large fermentation plant here in the UAE. Very, very exciting indeed. You're also one of the first ever to use precision fermentation technology here in the country as well. What sort of appetite are you seeing? And tell us more about what you're doing as well. Very exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I'm very excited to speak a little bit about Change Foods and what we're working on and precision fermentation at large. One of the really key challenges is obviously scalability of these proteins. So what we're working on in particular is animal-free dairy, or in particular casein, which is the key protein within milk that you need to create cheese. We all love cheese. It's very difficult for people to give up, if at all. And this obviously identified a huge market need back in 2019. My background's actually aerospace engineering and aviation, so it's not even science.
It's got to change.
But I got very motivated by technology and food and the systems structural changes needed to really bring this type of technology and help solve some of the sustainability challenges that we're facing. So that's where really it all started. But one of the key challenges I identified was obviously when you think about something as commoditized as dairy and milk proteins, it's driven, number one, by the productivity of your organism, so your yield, your titer that you're producing. That's sort of probably 50% of your cost overall, 50 to 60%. What's then second, I guess, in rank order would be the operating cost, which then comes really down to, OPEX. When you think about large-scale manufacturing, electricity and gas become really critical. I think that was really part of the sort of the attraction for the Middle East and securing really low cost of energy to help make this really feasible and come down the cost curve as quickly as possible. And third is media costs. So really the cost of your raw materials is really critical in that equation. So anyway, long story short, started in Australia actually, moved and headquartered our company in Silicon Valley in California. 4 years later, we've been scaling our proteins. We've brought on board some industry partnerships. And one of the key challenges is scalability for this technology globally, and I'm sure Rajesh will talk a little bit about it. But CMO manufacturing or contract manufacturing and tolling manufacturing, the landscape is quite limited, I guess, for food, because with food it's all driven by volume and scale. That's what really will drive down the unit economics. A lot of the existing infrastructure comes from pharmaceutical applications, which historically require much smaller volumes, and so there's very limited capacity, and oftentimes it's really expensive to scale at tolling manufacturers, and oftentimes it's really long. They're very booked out, and you have to wait. And as a startup, that's not really feasible. You need to be able to test quickly, fail, try different things, optimize your downstream process, optimize your organism, always changing and continuously improving. And I think when we realized the huge gap, then it also created an opportunity about 2 years ago to start exploring, well, what would it look like to build? And of course, the challenges then are CapEx and not diluting the company to zero when you have to potentially raise millions of dollars to build steel in the ground. So anyway, we looked at lots of different options. The UAE provided a huge amount of incentives, and ultimately, I think the strategic alignment with the government's incentives around food security, sustainable proteins, transition from fossil fuels to different new technologies, I think all work in our favour. And has, Abu Dhabi in particular, and we're actually looking at setting up in Kizad, has provided a fantastic location that can really secure really good access to cheap energy, wonderful land, a really great team, and we're excited to bring that here to the UAE and start operating in the next few years.
And when you get that government support, things really do take off, don't
Absolutely.
they? So
yeah, I mean, BCG is a really interesting statistic that by 2032, they predicted that at minimum their base scenario would be 11% of the future protein supply will be from alternatives. It can go as high as up to 22%, but that's really governed by how active governments get involved in that equation, because non-dilutive financing is critical. Without that, it's not going to work, right? Private companies, and especially startups, of which there's over 100 now in precision fermentation, will find it very difficult to raise funding for CapEx and heavy infrastructure, but therein lies a huge gap. I mean, they've estimated that we need 10 billion litres of new fermentation capacity by 2032. I mean, that's a lot. Yeah. The only way that's really going to work is with sustainable financing and government funding and non-dilutive funding, creative sustainable finance options through banks and so forth. So.
Really interesting. Rajesh, now you're quite a pioneer in this field. I've been reading that you have 12 precision fermentation-based products in the market today, developed and manufactured over the last 15 years. I mean, it's quite a big sort of stint there. You've been mainly serving the biopharma market, but you're also helping companies globally sort of help scale up and manufacture bio-ingredients. So tell us a little bit more about the most promising precision fermentation products that are out there and what you're excited about. And also what you do a little bit more as well.
Thanks for having us here. Good evening, everyone. Well, when we started almost 15 years ago, nobody called what we did as precision fermentation, right? So, and nobody called us novel protein company. This was very early. You're talking about 2008, 9.
Right.
And also nobody wanted to invest because nobody understood. When we went to the market and said we are developing animal-free products, so the investors didn't have a clue on how it's going to help change, the profile of the bio-ingredients that we are making today. But anyway, we successfully raised Series A and B in 2009 and 12 and started making products using precision fermentation, catering to biopharma market. Because in the biopharma, there is a huge issue of using animal-derived products and also human blood-derived products coming in. So the industry, the biopharma industry, is a little bit more open to pay for certain products that we make today because the margins are pretty high in the biopharma, so they can change, and the risk is pretty high for them of using animal-derived products. COVID is an example that how the virus can transmit from the animal to the human being through vaccines and insulin and all that. So we work with pretty much all the major vaccine companies, insulin companies, latest cancer drug companies today use our product. So that's one story for us and which is going well. About 5 years ago, we started getting calls from the Bay Area and mostly from Israel, Europe. And one of their requests were, hey, can you help us scale? Because you guys have done this over the last 12, 15 years. And so the industry kind of shifted, the precision fermentation industry kind of shifted from only looking at biopharma into food, cosmeceutical products, biomaterials. So if you ask me what has changed over the last, say, 5 years, I can give you a lot of examples, but I'll just talk about 2 or 3 of those. So when we started helping these companies 5 years ago, we built a second facility, about 200,000 liter facility, to cater to these CDMO services for helping companies like what David was doing at that time. And so what we have seen over the last 2-3 years is some of the startups are now a little bit more careful in choosing the product. because the techno-commercial analysis is happening way before they're deciding what products to make. There is a lot of respect to the complications of downstream process, which a lot of people ignored. There is a lot of respect for what raw materials to use, because what we have seen is as you scale from, say, 50,000 liter to 100,000 liter facilities, the raw material becomes critical, the cost of raw material. It's almost 60 to 70% of your cost goes into the raw material. So if you're not working on the raw material right at when you're developing your product, you're too late, because 70% of the product cost comes from your raw material. So simple things like a lot of companies ignored what type of products they use in their process. I can give you an example. A company started using urea, for example. Then they realized they have to use almost 10 times water, which typically companies ignore, the cost of water and the wastewater, which can actually lead up to 15 to 20% of your cost. Right. So there is a change happening in terms of, for example, even the strain, because earlier, a lot of the startup companies were looking at, can I get the product out? And then go to Series A or Series B. But now they have to go back to the drawing board and look at what strain is optimum for them. They could be yeast, but now more and more they're looking at fungal strains, which has a high titer. So there's a lot of changes are happening in the precision fermentation space. We have a luxury as a company to see how the market is shaping up, because we work with almost 35 companies today in the world, helping them to scale and manufacture at a very large scale. So we do help them from strain engineering all the way to commercial manufacturing. So we have all these companies coming at different stages of development. So we have a pretty unique combination of product development expertise and helping other companies scale. So pretty interesting.
Super interesting to see how this has evolved over the past 15 years when you first started out as well. So yeah, really, really brilliant to hear. Right, moving on over to Dr. Stefan, a great presentation earlier, of course. How do you assess the prospects then for a significant increase in the economic efficiency of precision fermentation? We spoke a little bit about the economics with the previous speaker as well, who gave us a very nice insight there. But what are your thoughts and remarks on that?
Yeah, like for the entire story, that's pretty difficult to answer, because it's always product specific. So you cannot just say, well, what works for one product works for all products, but there are, of course, some, again, general tendencies that can be applied. So first of all, we have a lot of modern screening technologies to really make the product better and to increase titer. So we can use cell-free protein expression to work on hundreds, thousands of different protein variants, which is impossible on a cell-based screening, except you have billions of dollars in a short period of time. So to make that better, having better titer. But in the end, it will be a combination of the entire process chain. So you cannot have a, let's say, really economic product just focusing on one part, that be the screening or the process or the product optimization or the fermentation or the downstream. It has to be a combination of all. And in some cases, or in many cases, not the, let's say, most efficient production route is also the best overall route. So my boss was always asking me, so how much protein do you produce in your fermenter per cell or per liter? I said, well, that's not the number that is in the end interesting. So ask how much have I produced in a month per how much money was invested in there. And we have a lot of processes that, that can be run for a shorter period of time, making it more easily to connect them to the downstream processing and having a more overall efficient process than just looking on optimizing one part. So it has to be a combination of all single puzzle pieces that makes then in the end a successful product or process.
Super interesting. Right, we have 15 minutes, and I'm going to throw in a question right at the end. But I would like to give this opportunity to our audience. Do we have any questions at this moment in time? Any questions at all? You've been quite an inquisitive audience so far, so please do feel free to ask any questions that you might have. Otherwise, we will continue. Maybe we'll give you a chance a little bit later on then. Right, what sort of emerging trends then? I mean, you very much spoke about you have this great advantage of sort of anticipating what might happen next in the future. So what sort of trends do you see emerging? Maybe you can all give us a nice insight, get your crystal ball out and give us some insider info.
Yeah, sure. I'll start. I mean, I think there's a real growth on consumer demands going into the 2030s that I'm really excited by. And I think the whole era of personalized nutrition, specialized nutrition in terms of, I mean, what's really interesting about precision fermentation is we get to pluck the scarcest part of the high value components within nature and now actually scale them with far less resources. So you can get the most nutritious components of food. And I think stevia is a great example. There's 1% of the stevia leaf, which is really the optimal part of stevia. To get that same perfect extract, you would have to, use a lot of resources, a lot of manufacturing to actually extract and get to that level. Or you can actually pluck it out, use precision fermentation, and do it at scale. So what this opens up is the whole opportunity to think about the highest value components of nutrition within our food spectra today, of which we're still discovering more. And I think if you think about breast milk, for example, that's a great example. We're always discovering more and more about infant nutrition and breast milk. So, it's very difficult to lactate a lot of people to provide breast milk, but now we can. Now we can actually pluck and create human caseins, human whey proteins, human lactoferrin. We can actually scale them and pluck out the most nutritious parts and actually create products that are biocompatible for humans, not from another species, which is more digestible, easy to, the list of benefits goes on and on and on. And I think I'm super excited by the fact that we can diversify nutrition supply, create products for consumers depending on their particular ailment, whether they want to sleep more, we're all time poor, we want convenience, we want the best nutrition possible. And this is going to open up a huge plethora of products that can be produced, targeted via precision fermentation, which you couldn't otherwise do using conventional techniques in agriculture. So I think that's the exciting prospect.
That's really exciting. And so you think we're going to see this in the next sort of 10 years, do you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's already starting because we're actually horizontally innovating already into other proteins from other species that opens up a whole new era of taste profiles, nutritional habits, products, supplements, adult nutrition, infant nutrition that otherwise would be extremely unattainable or extremely expensive. So for example, you start with a cow, you go to milk, you go from milk to casein, you go from casein to bioactives. You can skip the cow, all the waste goes away. You can go straight to casein, you can go straight to the bioactive. So what typically costs over $10,000 per kilogram to produce today, you can now take it to $100 a kilogram. Suddenly that price difference opens up an entirely new market.
Wow.
And I think this is happening right now. And it's going to only continue to snowball and get more exciting over the next few years.
Dr. Stefan or Rajesh, any comments? What are you both most excited about? What can you foresee the sort of direction of the market?
Let me kind of lay out the current challenge we have in precision fermentation. The biggest challenge in precision fermentation today is basically you're taking a microbe and asking them to do something that they don't want to do. And they want to do something else for their survival. And we are asking them to do something which is natural for them, right? And so what are we doing? So we take these microbes, give them some recipe, and put them in a spa environment. It's a spa. I mean, if you come and visit our facilities, large scale, 50,000 liter, perfect temperature, perfect pH, sugar everywhere for them. It's a spa environment. And begging them to make some product for us. So the microbes are pampered right now. They have been really pampered, and they're not performing. So to really make this precision fermentation more commercially viable, we need to make them work at a different environment. We need to make them more robust to be able to take not the processed sugar, but maybe some waste material, for example. So that has to change. Otherwise, most of the products that we are thinking of making in a precision fermentation is not going to make it. So that's the reality. So if you look at the spectrum of products that are commercially viable today using precision fermentation, starts from pharma. I mean, insulin is a very viable product. We make 12 products today in the market pretty viable. We make pretty good margins, 95% margin. And then after that, it comes, most of these cosmeceutical products. People are ready to pay a little bit more on cosmeceutical products if it's natural. Then you have biomaterials. Then you have functional food. Then you have the commoditized food, such as the egg and the milk, and then maybe the animal or pet food. So you have this whole spectrum, and we need to choose our battle right. You don't want to go all the way to food and then say precision fermentation won't work. It works in biopharma. It works in cosmeceutical. We make about, out of maybe 35 companies, we are helping about 5 or 6 major companies make cosmeceutical products that are viable today at $300 or $400 kg products. So we need to choose that battle. So that awareness is coming in the market, and I think the trend will be to choose the right product. As the technology improves, more and more products can become viable. That's what we see. Again, going back to the drawing board, use waste instead of sugar. Maybe your raw material cost should be 0 or even negative. Somebody pays you to take some waste from a corn mill, for example. They produce a lot of corn strip liquor that they are spending about $5 a kg to dispose. They actually pay you that, and you take that and make your microbes work rather than being in a spa environment. So that's going to happen, and that is already happening. A lot of companies like us are going back and saying, hey, can we use fungal? Can we change the raw material?
And to add to that, I would say here in the UAE, dates is a great byproduct, which I'm very excited to look at new carbon source development for date syrup. Yeah, date syrup. That's a great feedstock that we can use and take wasted dates and convert that into edible sugars so you don't have to import dextrose from other regions. You can actually use local supply. So I agree. That's a huge opportunity.
Remember, it's 70% of your cost, raw material.
Yeah,
so if you're not focused on that, if you're just focused on the OpEx, it's going to be challenging.
Yeah. Dr. Stefan, what in your mind then is commercially viable, and how do you choose the right products that we've just been talking about?
Well, I would say what's also very interesting, which is coming next and which can also be a product itself, is all the activities around artificial intelligence and precision fermentation. So I have a meeting with a startup a couple of months ago who had the mission to develop a software or a model tool to adapt existing microbial processes to new substrates. And I find this extremely interesting because everybody would like to use alternative substrates, but your bug doesn't want that. So you have to somehow find ways to adapt your microbe to your new substrate so that he likes it and everybody likes it. And this can be extremely tedious, and having a dedicated model to do so could be very helpful. And also the model can not just help to adapt substrates, but can also help to predict conditions during fermentation, can predict the course of the fermentation, so when will be the optimal harvesting time point. In combination with modern sensor, it can be used to have some kind of fermentation autopilot, adding the necessary substrates or additives to a very, very special time point when they are needed, and not when you think then you should add them, but when they are actually needed by the microbe. And in combination with automation, that can be a game changer, given that that all works. And as I'm not too deep into that IT models, I have absolutely no idea how they work, but I can say or judge the outcome of those activities.
Thanks so much. Quick chance for the audience to ask a question. Oh yes, we have a gentleman on the end. There we go. If we'd just like to get the microphone very quickly over to this gentleman here on the left side, that'd be brilliant. We've got about 6 minutes left, so time for a couple of questions, I think. And hopefully you've got a broad question for us all to answer. Please do tell us who you are and where you're from as well.
This is a question, I think, for everybody.
Great.
You can identify the 3 precision fermentation food products for the human diet, let's say in the next 5 years. 3 products where you say this will be very efficient and cost effective.
start?
Yes, please do.
Okay, well, it really comes down, I mean, when you think about dairy in particular, I mean, we're focused on cheese. But cheese is probably the most challenging product to focus on because it requires a lot of casein. But within the cheese spectra, you go from mozzarella with 20% casein down to feta with 4% casein and everything in between. So really it all comes down to your cost curve, what you can absorb and different product applications. But you can think about displacement of conventional dairy, or you can think about value adding to vegan dairy. So vegan, animal-free dairy companies, of which we're partnered with Upfield. Upfield is the owner of Violife Cheese, which is sort of the #1 vegan cheese brand in the US. Obviously there's limitations to growth for that category. It's great for vegans and vegetarians, even though they sort of put up with it. It's not, I mean, generally speaking, the performance of analog cheese today is very limited by plant proteins. They can't deliver the stretchability, the functionality, the calcium, the nutrition that comes from conventional dairy. So you can, before you get to sort of commoditize animal, displacement of dairy products, you can start with adding value to, vegan cheese products, for example. But even above that, you can think about sports nutrition, you can think about bars, you can think about... So there's different absorptions at different price points, which means that there will actually be lots of different products that will emerge into the market based on what costs they can absorb. So that's my expertise, at least within dairy and milk proteins. That's one way to think about it. But I think across the board, precision fermentation is already in the food system in many different areas. So it creates a lot of, vitamins. There's a ton of different examples, and they're usually reserved for high-value products that can absorb that margin, where a small amount goes a long way. So the thing I really liked about what we're doing is that rennet, which is the key enzyme used to curdle milk into cheese curd, that's been adopted since the 1990s. It's used in 90% of cheese making worldwide. So people are already consuming this technology in their cheese products without really knowing about it. All we're doing is taking it from rennet, one particular enzyme, and now taking it to a macronutrient level. So it's already adopted in the food system. It's already there. So I think, that's one answer to your question. Maybe there's a couple of other products that the others can
any
can
further
add.
comments?
I can talk about a little bit on that. Well, the question is, what are the products in the food which perhaps has a best chance of making it in the next 2 to 3 years using precision fermentation? Well, I don't want to give up a lot of this information, but anyway, I think it's a good question. I think some of the higher value products that are now currently being extracted from nature limited products that are coming from nature, but it's very limited. For example, vanilla, it's 99% is synthetic today. Only 1% is the real vanilla bean we get. So some of the flavors, food colors, exotic food colors that are replacing chemicals, nature limited products, and also the products that are kind of in between the health and nutrition, such as maybe baby food, lactoferrin, which is about $1,000 a kg today. So there are products which are going to make it in the next 2 to 3 years that we are working on ourselves and also for our customers. But it's a slow process to kind of bring these products in the market slowly. As the technology improves and the cost starts going down, you have other products coming in. That's what I said, the functional food will come later after these exotic high-value products in the food. And then ultimately, we hope to make it to some of the commoditized food, maybe in 10 years.
Very exciting indeed. Dr. Stefan, any further comments on that?
Of course, I'm a little bit biased, but I would make or put my money on the sweet proteins, not just because we have heard a lot of that, but also because it's a very ideal target for precision fermentation, because you have a product which is extremely potent, so you do not have to produce very much of it. Of course, the more produced, the easier it is later on to sell it. But even with the levels that you can reach today, it will already be possible to make an economically feasible process out of it. And because there's always so much ongoing on the regulatory point of view, I'm pretty sure that in the next 5 years we will have them broadly on the market.
Brilliant. We have only a minute left, so do we have a question? Yes. Sergey, final question.
So if only the minute, Sergey Ivanov, I'm from Russia. Do you agree that yes or no, or a small comment, do you agree that the biggest challenge for precision fermentation is public education and scare of the people about the product? It's synthesized, it's not natural, and to convince them, to educate them, this is the challenge of the industry.
Yeah, public and also the government regulators. In fact, recently in India, we were invited to go and educate some of these regulators to differentiate between a GM versus a non-GM food, because precision fermentation-based food is not really a GMO, because the organism is a GMO, but the GMO organism is producing certain product which is not a GMO. So they agreed. So a lot of these government agencies are themselves learning this, since they have no clue. Some of them don't have a clue. So,
very quick comment, yeah, just to round us up.
100%. But I think there's education to be done for sure. But I totally agree. I mean, it's education around the fact that this is GM derived. It's already in our food. We're already eating this. We're already eating products from this technology. It's really, and also there's been a lot of consumer studies done by multiple groups worldwide, including sort of the Hartman Group in the US, which has showed extreme interest to consume products of precision fermentation with the US consumer. Above 78% was their lowest statistic. And that was also revalidated by our own partners, global food company partnerships, who have done their own studies. So there's actually a huge, and it increasing with younger generations. So when you think about Gen Zs, it's up to as high as 90% interest to consume and purchase products derived from precision fermentation, because it's well, at least in dairy, it's lactose-free, it's cholesterol-free, it's hormone-free. You've got these other value-add benefits to still give consumers what they're looking for in their food product in terms of the experience and the taste, without sacrificing too much, and has all these other additional benefits as well.
Yeah, sometimes the benefits outweigh the challenges, don't they? So yes, Dr. Stefan,
yeah,
final comment.
I can make it short. I have nothing to add. So education for sure, but start with the regulators first, and then go to the public, because well, the regulators are usually older than the target group, which would buy the products, and they are much better informed than the regulators. So that's at least my feeling.
Well, thank you so much. Very encouraging session, that one. Thank you so much for sharing with us here today. That's all we've got time for. Thank you so much to our panel. Thank you.